Let's put everything into practice from anything that we've learned so far and build ourselves a character portrait literally from scratch. We're going to put in a character, we're going to pick a character, we're going to put clothing on them, we're going to put lights on them, we're going to put hair on them, we're going to put a pose, we're going to set up the camera, and we're going to render her out. I'm thinking we can do this twice, once as a full facial kind of square portrait and one as a full body version of the character. We might use a HDRI, we might not. Let's see how it goes. And also let's see what challenges we come up against. And I'm not going to cut anything out. I'm going to let you know if and when what happens. Every portrait is a different one, and you come across new challenges all the time. And we may encounter something that we haven't quite talked about, but I'll address it at that point. I gotta say, this is my favorite part, literally looking through my library and just putting things together. Usually the process for me starts with looking at the products I'd like to use. So I'm going to pick something from the Staff Picks for Genesis 8 Females Bundle 2. This is a really, really cool collection of bits and pieces. We get clothing items from 3D Universe. They're all DAS originals here. And Staff Picks usually means that anyone and everyone at DAS was in agreement, hey, this is good stuff. Let's put it all together. It's kind of the highest mark of quality. I really like the Staff Picks bundles and the Staff Picks items. So this is by 3D Universe. This is like a girly dress, a top and casual shorts, and a skirt and a strappy top here. We get a character, Josie, teenager character. Then we get two very nice hairs here, short pigtails and Bronwyn hair. I believe that is by Aprilish. Yes, Aprilish, wonderful hair. Aprilish, some really, really good vendors out there, real artists, and the stuff that they can make. I've got the greatest respect for them. Bronwyn hair, pigtails hair, then we have some hand poses and we have some expressions, so that'll come in handy. We've got some sunglasses. That might be a little bit much because we haven't learned the posing tools yet, so I might not use, but if we wanted them, there's definitely some variation here. There's a nightshirt. We can use this one's got D-Force on it. There's another character, Kanade. There's another character, Zol, for Genesis 3 and Genesis 8. So if you're using Genesis 3, you can put her on either Genesis 3 or 8. There's Sienna by Com Jackson. She's got a beautiful skin texture. They're very freckly, very nice. He does amazing characters and lighting products as well. Then some fresh beauty poses. That's going to come in handy. And we have a surfer outfit and a surfboard for Teen Josie, but that outfit is going to work on any Genesis 8 character. So as I'm looking through this, I'm thinking either the surfer outfit here with the surfboard. We'll see if we find a suitable pose with that. I'm going to have a look at this pose pack here. I'm going to pick one of the characters, maybe Sienna. I'm thinking Sienna is a good idea. This is an anime style character, so that it depends on the style you're after. And sunglasses, maybe. There's going to be an expression. Hair. Either of these will work, or Josie is also going to work. I think I'm going to use Sienna and the pigtails here, and then we'll take it from there. For the background, let's see if we can come up with a HDRI that portrays her at the beach. One of those things. That's kind of my initial thought of this is what I'd like to build from this. So let's get started. There might be a little bit of artistic nudity coming up. So if you're not okay with that, I recommend that you stop watching this video now. Dealing with 3D humanoid characters, nudity is sometimes unavoidable, especially when you load in custom characters. They usually come with nude skin. So, you know, nudity it is. Let's in fact start there. On my Smart Content tab, I'll head over to Figures. And this is something else I haven't quite spoken to you about. I can either now scroll through this and see if I can find Sienna here. There she is, down here. Or I could just go and look for her. I can just go and filter Sienna out. And then she comes up under Figures. If I'm not sure if she's a figure or what else, I can just go into All Products and then search for her there. But there's something else I wanted to just quickly show you. If I just use Figures as an example, there's this menu up here that shows me the order of which the items, how the items are displayed. So currently my sort order is name A to Z. So I'm coming up with 3D Universe Toon Mouse, then we have Aiko, then we have Aspen, then we have Bridget, the Brute, and so forth, alphabetical. But there are other options here for me. So I can reverse that, Z to A. I can search by product ID. Highest is usually the products that have been released later, and lowest are the products that have been released earlier. Then there's release date, recent, and oldest. There's also the order date, recent and oldest. So if something's been released 2 years ago, but I've only just bought it, my order date will be before that, so I could do that, and so forth. So install date is another one. If I've just installed something for the first time, then that's going to be the one. So, you know, several options of filtering this content. I'm thinking I've just kind of recently installed it, so I might just search for that and see if Sienna is coming up here. Yes, she is. So she's kind of furthermore at the top of the list. So the cool thing about this is that if you've just ordered something and you're eager to play with it and you've forgotten what it was that you've ordered, then you can just use this and say, when have I installed it last, or when have I ordered it last, or when have I recently ordered it, and then all those items will be grouped at the top. Kind of nice. So I'm going to go and double click the Sienna product here. And there is my actor under figures here. That is the figure that I want. I'm going to double click her, wait for Dash Studio to load her in. And there she is. Does she look happy? I think she looks like default unhappy. It's probably because she's not wearing any clothes. I'm sure there are skin materials in here as well. Under iRay, I can have a look at that, but I think I'm going to stay with the defaults for now. But you could change the eye color and the lips color and all that. That is in the materials under iRay here. Shaping on a custom character usually means that you can dial the figure in or take her out. So if you had applied a different figure first and you're using skin textures from a different figure, you can go and just dial the Sienna body or the Sienna head in independently. I'm okay though. I'm going to leave her as she is and have a look at clothing. So that is now under wardrobe. This box here at the bottom is already ticked, filter by context, and we said we're going to use the surfer outfit that I can't seem to find here, so I'm just going to go look for it. Surfer outfit for Teen Josie. That comes with several options here. This is essentially an outfit of 3 clothing items: the bikini bottoms, bikini top, and a top above the bikini top. So if I use this one here, then I load all 3 clothing items at the same time. This is a wearable preset here. Or if I wanted to use one of these items, I can just load them independently. So let me use the first one here. And that'll put all these items on her. And I'm also thinking maybe we'll have a look at different materials for this outfit. So those are then under materials, of course. If I whittle that down, there's iRay here. And in iRay, I have props as well as wardrobe. So this is probably going to separate the surfboard materials that we get from the clothing materials. As I go into props, I only see the surfboard. And as I go into wardrobe, I only see my outfits here. And that's kind of cool. Outfits looks like they're split into the bikini top and bottom as well as the tops. So the top is literally the one with the sleeves, and these are kind of a combined version of the bikini tops and bottoms. So in order to apply that, if I wanted to use this one here, number 5, then I can't just go and double click that. Nothing is going to change on my character. For this to apply, I need to actually select the clothing item rather than my figure. So if I open her up, I see that the bikinis and the tops and stuff, that is parented underneath her. So I can either go and select that from the scene tab, or I can go and right click anywhere on the item in question, like say the top. If I go and right click on that, then I get a context menu, and in here I'll see that select the surfer top outfit. I can go and do that. And that sometimes just selects the particular node I was over. So in this case, it was the right shoulder bend. It won't really matter, but I recommend using the scene tab and just selecting the item that you want to change from there. So in this case, I'm going to put this top number 6 on here, double click that, and then that'll change. Had I used the bikini top and bottom instead, then nothing would have happened, because that's a material preset that was not made for the top, only for the bikini and the top and bottom here. So let's go and do that now. Next, the bikini top. Let me select that and say top number 5 is what I want to use. There we go. And then the same with the bikini bottom. I can use the same material preset to load that in. There we go. All right. I do see some issues here already, and that is our friend Poke Through is coming in here. I hadn't quite expected that. Okay. We need to go and fix that. It's not something I thought we needed to address in this part, so I might show you something that I had kind of planned for the second part, but Poke Through is going to creep in anytime. And we have that in 2 places. We have that on her breast here, and we have that on her hips here. So in order to see that a bit better, And we actually have that on this top here as well. Okay, let's deal with this one item at a time. So let me go and make the top invisible, and let's deal with the bikini here first. So the issue is that the figure geometry is poking through the clothing geometry, and that is what's causing this, and it shouldn't look like that. So in order to investigate that, I'm going to go and select the top and have a look on the parameters tab and just see what's going on. So first of all, we have on the mesh resolution tab, it looks like the item is in base resolution. It has a subdivision surface modifier applied, but it looks like it's not active. So let's make that happen, see what that does. We're going to talk more about this, but essentially this is a setting that often comes with clothing items that implies more geometry on the fly than is actually there. And it gives us the appearance of a high resolution object as it goes and smooths the object out and gives us, a high resolution at render time. So let's set that to high. It hasn't solved the problem, sadly. The second thing I'm looking at here is that I see it doesn't have a smoothing modifier applied. That is another thing that is applied or implied on the fly with DAZ Studio. Many clothing items have it. It looks like this item doesn't, so we need to create our own. Once again, a little bit of an advanced feature, but it's essentially a sort of collision detection that we add to a clothing item, and that can go and follow the outlines of a figure. So essentially the clothing says, hey, if there is a collision item like a figure underneath me, I mustn't intersect with that, and instead I'm going to go and shift my position and follow the contours of that figure so that I don't poke through. And we don't have that set up, so let's make that happen. That happens under Edit, with our clothing item selected, Edit, Object, Geometry. This one is the subdivision surface modifier. We need add smoothing modifier. That's the one. So usually this is set up on clothing items. In this case, it was not done. So we're going to go and add that manually. That means we have a separate menu here, mesh smoothing, and we can also see poke through is already history. So we don't have to do anything here. This has now solved our problem. If it hadn't, then there are these two values I can play with, the smoothing iterations and the smoothing collisions. There's also the collision item that I can set. So in my case, the collision item of the bikini is in fact my figure, so that's correctly set. But if it hadn't been, then I can override that and set something else. So that's perfect. One problem solved. The next one, bikini bottoms, has the same issue. These straps should probably be on the outside of the figure. So let's go and select the bikini bottoms here and have a look at the same thing. Mesh resolution is set to base. So let's set that to high resolution to begin with. And then we also don't have a smoothing modifier. Let's make that happen as well. Under Edit, Object, Geometry. It's a lot to take in, I know. But once you've done it 150 times, it's really going to grow on you. Add smoothing modifier. And we're already good. I don't really have to do much else. Or do I? Look, this strap is still buried in the skin a little bit. So that's cool. This is a really good example to show you this, because it means that I may play with my values here on the mesh smoothing tab, and instead of the default 2 smoothing iterations and 3 collision iterations, I'm just going to go and up my collision iterations to 10. And watch what happens when I do that. DAZ Studio calculates this a little bit and just does this calculation more often. Smoothing iterations may have also worked, but this has already solved the problem. So we're good here, and we're good here. We're good everywhere. That's cool. I think I've also seen this issue on the top. I mean, it was transparent, but I can see here it's still digging into the skin. And I don't know if we're going to frame it up yet or not, but I have a feeling it probably also benefits from a smoothing modifier. So let's have a look. It's not in there. Base resolution, change that to high resolution. I'm going to speak more about the subdivision surface modifier in the next part. There's a lot to be said, especially in consideration with the Genesis 8.1 figures, which have a higher subdivision level applied by default, and that can get in the way as you're working with the figures in the viewport. Now we'll go and Edit, Object, Geometry, add smoothing modifier. Boom, poke through is already been taken care of, so that's perfect. All right. It looks like I'm not actually using my universal manipulator here. I've still got my node selection tool. So I'm going to just go and switch over to that, as I will need it in a moment, I'm sure. Let's see if we can pick a handsome pose for our character next. I'll select my figure for that and have a look at the poses section. And I'm going to have to clear out the search field here that still says surf, so I'm not seeing any poses. I'm going to clear that out and see if I can find it. There's expressions here as well. These are the poses, but if I don't know where they are, just search for them. Double clicking it. This shows me all the poses in the product, which there are a lot of, including expressions. That's quite nice. Let's go and whittle this. Whoops. Let's go and whittle this down and say by function. And we have kneeling poses. That might be nice, her kneeling somewhere on the beach with the surfboard next to her. That might work. Let's go and try some of these out. So just double click and see if anything tickles our fancy. Sometimes poses come in two variations, like in this case it looks like it's the same pose, it's just mirrored to the other side. That's kind of handy. There are also tools that you get for this. I'll introduce you to one in the next part of the course, which is the Scene Tools by 3D Universe. So they're all, you know, just whatever we want. Leaning, oh, leaning might be nice. There's leaning, what else we got? We've got sitting on something, and then we have standing. I'm thinking leaning, if we go and combine that with the surfboard from the surfer outfit, you could be leaning on that, either on the surfboard like this. That might be nice if the surfboard is actually that height. I don't know that yet. Or you could just casually lean against it, and maybe the surfboard leans against something else. Maybe we don't really see that, especially in the, you know, if the surfboard's kind of digging into the sand. She could be sitting on it. That's also quite funky. I love it. This is really nice. I'm thinking maybe this one here. Let's try that. Let's bring in the Josie surfboard that came with the outfit. I'm thinking this is nice. We can do something here. So surfboard, the way to find that is literally to either go to the files and then just go and search for surfboard. It's probably a prop, I'm thinking. This also might require us to disable the filter by context here so that props actually shows up on the side. And there we go, surfs up surfboard. Is that it? That might be a different surfboard. I don't think that's the surfboard. Let me go and do a different search here by going back into products, and I'll just go back to my figure here, which is, no, sorry, that was my wardrobe, wasn't it? Ha, it was surfer outfit. And then in props here, that's it, the surfer outfit surfboard. There we go. So that's the one. That is a prop, in fact. Let me go and go load that in. Here it is, comes right into the center of the scene. We probably wanted it to be standing up. It has, I believe, no, it hasn't. I thought it may have accidentally parented itself to the figure. It hasn't done that. So I'm going to go and select it here and probably move it over. Why don't you rotate? There we go. It didn't want to rotate. I might rotate it like this and then move it up. I might even rotate it around so that the fins are at the top. It might be easier on the parameters tab here. Under transforms rotation, this is kind of over 90 degrees. That's okay for me. Maybe like that. If I set this to something like 180, then it sits with the tip in the sand, I'm thinking. And then that's actually the wrong way around. I meant to have that go around this way. And then also it going kind of like this, so she can go and lean against that. If this is a little bit too finicky to do this with the mouse, feel free to use the dials for that. So I don't necessarily want to change the position of my figure, just put the surfboard in place here. And then also maybe angle it a little bit so that it kind of looks nice for the camera, as if she's just like put it into the sand like this and then she's kind of leaning against it. Might be a nice splash of color there. So one thing I'm still missing is that her arm is digging into this a little bit. So that's better done on the translate option here, probably X translate. Just when it goes and touches this a little bit. We don't want to dig it in there, but that's something like that. I think I'm happy. I'm calling this good. I'm calling this good. Now, one thing that my viewers keep telling me, Jay, save your scene as you're working with it. You never know what happens. And I might just do that. I might just do that. I'll go and use my custom library that I've made for that. And I might just go and create a brand new folder for this so that I keep everything about this scene together. I'm going to go and right click on here, create a subfolder and call it Surfer Scene. And anything that I save about the scene can go in here. Hit that plus icon, say Surfer V1, just in case I wanted to save multiple versions of it. And there it is. Perfect. Now, she doesn't look quite happy just yet. Maybe an expression and some hair might sort that out. Let's take a look at the expression first. Zoom right into her, select my character, head back over to the Smart Content tab, and go back into maybe poses here. Clear that search field out. And I think we had the Fresh Beauty poses. I think they came with expressions, didn't they? Yes, they did. Let's have a look. Just one clicking through them and seeing what they look like. I'm just using one clicks here. There's a really clever way of blending these things together. You could also go onto the parameters tab and search for the dials and then dial these things in and out if you wanted, mix and match things. This is kind of nice. I think I like that already. Something like that. And we'll learn more about this in the next part here. Nice. She's all happy and stuff. So whatever we like, really. Look through other packs. We can go and turn her head a little bit if we wanted to do that by selecting that and then either using a dial, or this is difficult to select here. So I'll go and say maybe side and twist. Like that, she's looking at us a little bit. We can do that. And we'll learn more about posing characters with other funky tools in the next part as well. But this is a cheap way to do this and a quick way to do this. Expressions, I spend a lot of time with expressions just to get them just right. I find there's sometimes the make or break of a portrait. I think maybe I'll use this one here. That's the fourth one. Fresh Beauty Teen Jane expression. So they seem to work fine. I like it. And in fact, come to think of it, this might actually be a nice frame up here already. I don't know what my hair is going to look like, but if we make this a square under render settings, general, I'll go and set this to square, and 1200 by 1200 is a good starting point here. I might render this out much higher later, but I think this is a good way to frame it out and lock this in as a camera. Do you remember how we do that? We head over to create new camera up here. Oh, was I zoomed in? Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Sometimes when I get carried away, I forgot to zoom out. I'm sorry, I hope this is still usable. If not, I might record this part again. Let's just, fingers crossed that it's usable. So create a new camera here. Hit active view and hit accept, and that is our camera. That means I can now go ahead and run around with my perspective view still, and then still be able to frame this up. That's quite nice. Aspect frame, we're probably going to make some corrections there as we come to the end of this, but let's see how much we can put together in the meantime. Hair might be an important one. Hair is one of those things, I might put that on now and have a quick nosy at how it looks, and then for when it comes to the render settings, I might go and disable it again just so that we have a faster preview render every time. So hair, what did we say? We had the pigtail hair and we had the Bronwyn hair. So those are, you can obviously use any hair that you like. Maybe I'll see what the pigtails look like. Oh, this is an interesting one. I have two files here in the product under hair, and they're both called pigtails short. They're named the same thing, but I'm not entirely sure which one's which. So we need to make use of a little tab at the bottom of the content library, which is the info tab. So if I open that up, I get a little bit of information underneath here. And from the file name, I can derive which one's which. It's a little hard to read for me here. But this one is for Genesis 8. And the other one, if I select that, this one's actually for Genesis 3. So that's an interesting indication. This is the path to this actual file name. So I can see this one's Genesis 8, this one's 3. So this is the one I need. I'll tell you more about figure generations. In principle, the 3 version would work on 8, but the process called auto-fitting is going to be triggered. And I'd rather, if we have a native version of the hair, we'd avoid that. So I'm going to go and double click that on here, close that down, and there we go. That is our hair. Nice. I think I might leave it. And her hand intersects now with the hair a little bit. So that might not look good. We may just have to go and take the hand and move it away a little bit. So I just go and select that and move it. Whoops, that's the finger. Let's go and select the actual hand here. I just go move that up a little bit. I just want to avoid any intersections there. That's probably going to be believable. I'm okay with that. Hair color. Select. This is just by right clicking that. Let's see what the materials are under iRay. Since we have a blue top, we could, and a blue surfboard here. Haven't looked at the surfboard materials here, but maybe we can find something that we like better. We could go with blue hair. That is possible. And then there's also a separate material here for the bow tie in the hair. Maybe we'll make it black. Black and blue, that might be cool. We'll see what this looks like in iRay in a moment. Just for now, let me go and select that surfboard and see if we wanted to just have a quick nosy at the surfboard materials. Since this is all now in smart content, I should be able to use my materials tab here with filter by context enabled, and there I find it. Perfect. Surfboard outfit. So I can go to materials. In here, I can go into iRay and go to my props and then see maybe there's something better that we like here. Red. This is kind of interesting. This is whole part of the creative process. Maybe this is too much now. So we have blue and we have black and we have light blue and we've got dark blue and we've got red and black. So those are too many accent colors, I find. So that is also a little busy. This might work with a different color combination on the clothing. So really, this one of those things. I take all this into consideration when I'm thinking: do the colors match, or are there too many colors here? Do I want that to be more tone and tone? So I'm thinking actually the first one that might be what the doctor ordered here. We could try this and then change the hair color. That might work to something. Maybe we stay with a brunette, or if we stay with this, then I'd say let's also try something like a red hair, and then that would all be tone and tone again. Let's use, I can't decide. This maybe with brunette hair instead, you say? Let's try that. Sometimes the right click selection doesn't work on the items here. Sometimes it just doesn't do it. It's usually when something is in front of it, and in my case it's the camera. So the camera was kind of overlaid with the character, and DAZ Studio doesn't really know which layer as such I'm clicking. So I could make the camera invisible and then try to select the hair. Now it'll work. Or I just go and select it from the scene tab. See, now I've got a problem here. It seems to be selecting the camera but not the hair behind it, and that's because the camera is in front of the character already. So either way will work. Hair materials, iRay, and we'll see, do we have something? There's a very deep red here. That might be too much as well. That might be too much. I might just stay with the default brunette. Yeah, I might just stay with that. But you know, creative decisions that can really elongate the process. Got the expression, we got the pose, we got a prop in here. I think now it's time to make another, quickly save that again. Since I haven't really changed much since then, I could either go and save a new iteration. So call this one Surfer V2. And just switch on my iRay viewport and see what this looks like in iRay, just so that I get a bit of an impression. Saving is one of those things before you do anything with rendering, either with Control R or with switching the iRay viewport over. Saving is always a good idea, just because, you know, rendering really takes it out of your computer. So it certainly is a picture. It doesn't suggest to me we're outside by the beach and having a good time. It looks a little bit dark and dull and gray. So why don't we try, and I don't know if this is going to work, but why don't we try to bring in a beach type HDRI, either at sunrise or in bright sunshine, and we'll see how that works. I think in our current perspective, just with the camera, we might not see a lot of it, but it'll probably help sell the idea that we're actually on the beach if we see something like water or at least the sky in the background. Let's go do this. Remember that site I told you about, HDRI Haven, or I think Polyhaven they're called these days. Polyhaven, there we go. I'm sure they have a good beach HDRI for us. If not, there are a ton of them on the DAS store that you can also use. I'll go into the HDRI section and maybe I'll search for beach. It doesn't need to be a beach. I mean, we're not going to see quite that much on it. How's this a beach? The concrete tunnel, how's that a beach? Okay, fine. Search algorithms do get it wrong. This one's certainly secluded beach. That might be something where she's surfing. We could try that out. We get a representation of what the shadows look like here. So these will be harsh shadows. Kind of depends if we're after that or not. There's also some of these, they have much softer shadows. Like this one's nice as well. This one's slightly softer, still fairly harsh. These ones have no shadows, almost no shadows at all. I'm thinking Umhlanga Sunrise. I'm going to try that. I'm going to try this one or this one. These ones here. Spiaggia di Mondello and Umhlanga Sunrise. Let's try these two and just see what they're like. Yeah, I can see she's been surfing here. That's her house. Perfect. I like it already. 8K should be sufficient. Probably 4K is probably enough. And HDR, that's good. Download 23 megabytes. Let's do that. Save it in my downloads. And then I'll go back one step and try the other one as well. That was also a beach. That was this one, Umhlanga. 4K HDR. It remembers my settings here. That's quite nice. And if I do need a higher resolution version of that, I can always go and bring that back. Just, you know, one's maybe in the sun, in the morning, and the other one is kind of in midday. Let's see which one works best. All right, that is under render settings. That is under environment. That's a tab that's now available only because we had that iRay preview. It smuggled itself in here. If I didn't see that, I'd head over to create and then I say new environment options node. So I already have it here and changed this one out to the one that I've just downloaded. So I'll go and browse there in my downloads folder. Ideally, I would put it somewhere else. Shall we try Spiaggia first? This takes a moment for DAS Studio to do the calculation. There's this little orange bar at the bottom right that'll eventually finish as it's processing the HDRI. And eventually, there it is. We see the light change. And let's just see what this looks like with the dome on. And there we go. Water in the background. I'm loving it already. What does this look like in iRay? This is exciting, isn't it? Certainly bright, sunny outdoors. Remember, we can add a regular point light or a spotlight into this if we wanted to brighten up the eyes. I think the shadows currently don't really do her any favors. I'm also not entirely sure where exactly the shadows are going. So if we go back to the perspective view and just have a look at the full screen here, we also wanted to frame up a full body render here as a portrait. Let's go and do that. I think we can probably have a look at what else the HDRI has to offer in regards to background. So let's just have a quick nosy and see what might make a nice background. So perhaps not the trees, perhaps not the houses. And I'm kind of a big fan of the mountains and the water here and the palm trees as well. So let's see if we move the Y rotation of the dome a little bit. Under dome, under Y rotation, if we move that left or right. So this is easier to see in filament. So I might change that back. I might also go and change the environment intensity a little bit. I think it's a little blown out, just for the purposes of seeing what I'd like to have, what I'd like to have there. I think something like that, that might be better than just the plain water, like this. And then we can also kind of half think, how do we want our portrait shot to look like? So we could do this. So if I do that, then there's maybe too much of the surfboard. If I wanted to literally standing in the sand, maybe this is kind of nice. I'm going to go and lock that camera position in, like we discussed. I'm going to go and make this one the full body one. Copy active viewport transforms. I'm going to call this one camera portrait, or camera wide rather. and then the previous one is going to be the camera close, just so that we remember what we did there. On my wide camera also, I don't want that to be square. I would like for that on the parameters tab, under dimensions, I'm going to switch the local dimensions on and turn this into like a 2x3 portrait. So switch the constraint proportions off, and I'll make that 2000 wide and 3000 deep, or long rather. And sometimes that doesn't change until I preview the wide camera. There we go. And I can go and line it up just like I want. So intensity, we're gonna have a look at how that looks with the shadow. Maybe I need a little bit more here. That's that. Quickly locked in. I'll go and switch the aspect frame off again, switch back to my perspective view. Oh yeah, this is another thing that happens to you and me and all of us all the time. If you're on the camera and accidentally now think you're in the perspective view and you would go ahead and do something drastic, you essentially ruin your framing. And I can't tell you how many times this has happened to me, but it does happen. And if you want to avoid that, well, first of all, make sure you restore the framing to what it needed to be. And then you can lock parameters off so that even if you are on the camera, you won't be able to change its framing while you're using the viewport transforms, because we've all been there, and it's annoying sometimes, especially if you've been very meticulous about this. Let me just show you how that works on the wide camera. If I go to the parameters tab under general, then there is all these parameters here, and each of them have this little lock icon here. So in our case, we really want to lock off all the transforms, so especially translation, but also rotation. I can either do this by clicking on every single lock icon individually to lock individual properties. I can't now rotate this anymore, which is, nice. But if I go and pick these, I can still use the transform control. So even though nothing rotates anymore, transforms is not locked. So I'd have to either go into the transforms and now also lock these one by one. But that's a lot of mouse clicks. So there is thankfully an easier way to do this. Let me go and undo this and show you the easier way. You can go and right click anywhere here in this gray kind of space here. If you click there, you get this context menu, and one of these items is lock selected properties. But as the name suggests, all these properties need to be selected for this to happen. So the selected thing is the thing that has a yellow square around it or a yellow border around it. So this one. If I were to use it, then this one will be locked, but the other top two won't be. So if you wanted to select multiple properties, just drag an imaginary square around it. So left click and drag this. Now they're all selected. Right click here in the gray space, head over to lock selected properties. Now they're all locked here with the lock icon. And then you can go one step further. If you wanted to lock all the transforms, you could just go out here to this. If you wanted to also lock the scale properties, you could just go left click and drag all of these, then go right click on the bottom here and say lock selected properties. Now everything is locked. And now you can't use the viewport controls at all anymore, which is kind of what you want. Let's do the same thing with the close-up camera. So different camera, close-up camera selected. Left click and drag all these properties since we're happy with them. Whoops. Left click and drag all these properties. Right click down here. Lock selected properties. Locks everything. Perfect. Another catastrophe averted. Let's take a look at the intensity of the HDRI under render settings. And then the intensity. I might go and put that down to 0.6. Just for now, maybe it's not quite as midday as the HDRI suggests. And let's have a look at this in iRay. And then we're nearly there. So all we need to do is maybe brighten up her face a little bit. Also, it looks like her feet are not touching the ground. This is a bit of a dead giveaway. I think the way HDRIs and auto height works is that it looks at the lowest point of geometry in your scene and determines that as the bottom point. So in our case, what we can do is either move the surfboard up a tad or move her feet down a bit, and then we're basically there. Let's go do this in a second viewport while we're here. Side by side will work best. I'll switch my aspect ratio off here and go and look, in fact, not through the perspective view, but from the front view. And that now shows me that the surfboard is a little bit maybe too deep. Let me go and select it and just go move that up so that it rests with her feet on the ground plane. And now we see that that shadow has almost been corrected. Not quite. We can do this differently as well. We can override the automatic control in, yeah, there we go. That's better. That's better. We can override the bottom control in the environments tab option. In fact, let's just see how that goes. So if I go and put that into the sand, this is supposed to be buried now. There's something else we can use, which is an iRay matte that will mask off the bottom of that surfboard. I'm not going to go into it here, but no, it exists. The third option is to literally chop this bit off with morph in an external program. So under ground here, we have the ground position mode, which is currently set to auto. But if I were to set this to manual, then I can go and do this. So that's kind of nice as well. So now it appears that the surfboard is in fact digging into the ground plane. And if I wanted to make further adjustments, then the ground origin Y is the value that I need to adjust. Now she's sticking in the sand. So another possibility. And like so often in 3D, there are... what's the expression? Multiple ways to skin a cat. It's like my surfboard. I'm even thinking let's put it into the sand a bit more so that we can believably say, well, somebody's going to put that there, and she is in fact able to lean against it. So are the feet okay here, or do we need to work on that? Thinking maybe a little bit. So she can probably go just down a tad, so that almost like part of her feet are sinking into the sand. Maybe that's a little bit too much. Maybe it's okay. I think it's a bit too much. I think this is best for the parameters here under translate. This is maybe minus 0.8. I just want her feet to dig into the sand just a little bit. Like so. I think that's all I need really. Maybe -1. I think minus 0.8 was exactly on the money. So minus 0.8. And then we're good. So look, that's the full body portrait done. That's our ground plane adjusted. That is the surfboard looking handsome. Wide camera's looking kind of good. I mean, we'll leave it like this. We'll leave it like this. What's the close-up camera doing? Also not bad. I think I might want to adjust that a little bit, for which, of course, I now need to go and unlock my parameters again. But it's just as easy as select all of them, right-click, unlock selected properties. Now I have full control over this again. Maybe I just want her a little bit tighter here. I've also not quite adjusted the depth of field and all that. Actually, I'm not sure. I think I like it both ways. I like it either way. I'll go dolly out a tad, head over to the camera properties and adjust the focal length so that we're taking her with a little bit more like 120. A little bit of a longer lens. I want to see what the perspective then looks like. It's difficult to either, so it's framing wise, that you can either frame her up like this, or you'd frame her up literally much closer. But then we wouldn't really see the surfboard anymore. So it kind of depends. It's almost worth making a third shot then, because this, I'm not sure if people would get this is actually a surfboard. So I might just frame her up a little wider, just so that we see the face and the upper body, like so. And I might even make a third camera then. I just say edit, duplicate that, and then this is going to be our camera close. Yeah, close 2 is good. Closer maybe. And it'll have all the same properties here. So if I go and say this is now my close camera, I can go even closer in there. So you have 3 versions of the same person. As good as a profile picture here. What isn't good is the lighting on the face. So let's discuss that next. I might just leave this viewport on here and use this as my perspective view. And I'm thinking the magic is probably going to be a point light that we're going to turn into sphere geometry and just give her a little bit of brighten up here. And then also going to soften up that shadow a bit. Let's do that. We can either zoom right in here like so, and then select create new point light, and then we'll use apply active viewport transform. So that's going to be right here. That'll put it into approximately the right position. The other option would be that I would go and drag it out from the bottom here. Oh, universal selector needs to be selected here. And I'll move it kind of in front of her. See, I've been betrayed again by the 3D mechanics here. Yeah, something like that. That's probably going to be just fine. And even with the default settings, it's already doing a really nice job of brightening something up. I think though, because it's a bright sunny day, under parameters, under light, I think I might just make this a tad orangey, just a tad. You can also change the light temperature, and then I'm going to go and add a little bit more oomph to it. Not much, but maybe like 5,000. Let's try that. It just takes away the shadow here. And I'm going to go and change the light geometry from a point into a sphere in this case. That makes it even softer. We don't want to render the emitter. Might put this a little bit further up. All right. I think I really need to see this without the light being shown here, because that's a little bit much. We've already seen how I can go and remove my manipulator here. I can switch over to the node selection tool. That makes that go away. But I still see a fairly big light here that if I make it invisible in the scene tab, then the light is gone and I don't see the effect of the light. So I can't do that. Thankfully, there's another option with any of these things selected. There is the draw settings tab that we've left open, thankfully. And on there we have, under drawing, we have an option to disable the node avatars. That's this here. If I go and select that, then my light is still having an effect on the scene, but it'll go and not be drawn in the viewport anymore. So that's kind of nice. You can use this on cameras as well. It's a good tip from Dartenbeck. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that, buddy. It's one of those things that, you know, I've been using DAZ Studio for so long, and I've only fairly recently found out about this, and I thought I'd tell you about it. So there we go. We've brightened up the eyes a little bit. We can the exact value is to be determined. ×2 might be too bright. Kind of depends on what we're after. Maybe that's actually okay. Maybe that's actually okay. I'm going to try and make the HDRI a little bit less bright. We had 0.6. Let me try 0.4. Let's see if that's nice. Because making this, yeah, I think this is much better, because otherwise we're blowing out the background a little bit too much. And I think that's nice. So that's for the closer one. This one is for the close-up one. That's also nice. If it's not quite bright enough, we can always do that in Photoshop. There's always an option to make that a little bit brighter. You know, I'm just seeing that the surfboard being part of the outfit, I have a feeling it's also low res. I see a little bit of a, you know, just chunkiness here. Let me see if I can go and take care of that. Surfboard parameters. Don't know if you can see it. If I just zoom in, there's a little bit of, I find this, I can see almost the geometry here. And under mesh resolution, I can see it's also base. So yeah, if I make that high resolution, then this should all get a little bit rounder here. We'll talk more about the subdivision surface modifier implication in the next part. But yeah, so far, I think we're almost there. If you wanted to make that a little bit more stylish, I say depth of field. Let's pull out all the stops. Let's pull out all the McGubbins. That'll be set on every camera independently. And it'll really depend on what we want there. I'm just going to go and switch off the dome here quickly, just so that I can see this a little better. So my first camera was the close-up camera. I've made that invisible, so I'm going to bring all the cameras back here. This one, that's the close-up camera under parameters. Let's just quickly do this. That was under camera, depth of field enable. There's our focal distance here, either with a little ball or with a focal distance slider. I'm going to go and zoom in, well, not zoom in. I'm going to go and hopefully shift that onto her eyes like so. And I think I'll leave the default of 22. There we go. There's actually, you know, speaking of cameras, there's something else I thought I should mention. When I told you about this larger frame here that we can adjust with this here, with the frame width, that is actually the equivalent to, if you've been working with other programs, that is the equivalent of the sensor size of your film bag, essentially. So this would use a film bag of 36 by 36 millimeters. It's kind of equivalent to a 35 millimeter camera, which used 36 by 24 millimeter negatives, but that's only because they were rectangular rather than square. So if they were to be square, then it's like a 36 by 36 film back here. If you're used to medium format photography, you're probably used to something like 6 by 6 or 6 by 9, in which case you type in 60 here, and then you'd have the equivalent focal length of that. So, you know, if there's outstanding photographers among you, then this would be that, 60 by 60. Or if you're used to whatever, using an IMAX camera or whatnot. These days, quite tragic actually, Canon have just announced that the next DSLR that they're going to produce, the EOS 1DX Mark III, is going to be the last DSLR that'll come out, because mirrored cameras, that's just a thing of the past. And that's kind of a frustrating thing to hear, isn't it? But yeah, it's just the dent of time, I guess. So yeah, mirrorless from now on. And then we're not really going to be tied to those types of values anymore. But I think to me, it's really important and helpful to think about things like focal lengths and all that in equivalent of what 35 millimeter film used to be like, because that's just what I'm used to. Just thought I'd mention that little aside there. So that's the depth of field setup for this. Let's go and set this up for all the other cameras and just preview what it looks like and then adjust the values afterwards. So that's the close one. This one's the wide one. I think that could also do with depth of field. Ding! Because that's wider, we have a much wider amount of depth of field here. I'm going to leave the 65 millimeter focal length as a default, but this I think I can make much shallower just to see my girl here, and even start blurring out the surfboard a little bit. I just, you know, I'm thinking that might be good if I put this to 8. Oh, okay, so like 6.5 then. 5.6 then. Okay, fine. Let's do that. Focal distance onto kind of here. And then my closest camera, that'll also have depth of field, and that is now extremely shallow, so I think I'm going to make that a little bit less shallow just so that I can catch the eyes here. And we'll see what all that looks like in situ. So I think time to save again, for sure. Scene Surfer V3. All right, time for a little bit of an iRay preview. Close-up camera. Now these node avatars here, as I've just switched them off, they are switched off on the iRay viewport. So this setting here under draw settings, that is context sensitive to the viewport that is currently selected. So they're still showing in filament, but they're no longer showing in iRay. That's kind of nice to do it that way. And I'm thinking depth of field wise, we're good. Look at that. Her hair is starting to blur out. Her arm is starting to blur out, but her eyes are dead on in focus. I love it. Absolutely love it. There's also, let's have a look at that together with the dome. Switch on dome, there we go. You could render this independently. You can render this without the dome and then make the figure invisible, then render the dome, composite it in Photoshop if you find the background is still a little bit too bright. So all kinds of tips and tricks that you can do there. Then we have the wide shot, which almost has a bit too much depth of field. So that's a little bit too shallow. Let's correct that. I think that's a bit much. So on the wide camera, let's make it 16. That looks a little bit more natural. So I think what isn't quite believable is that this is all fairly perfect and this is already too blurred out. So I think we need to go and do something a little bit less shallow. There we go. That's more believable, I'm thinking. I like it. Shadows, very realistic. Very much like it. There's still post work I'd like to do in Photoshop, but we'll talk about that in the second, in the second part. And then there is the close one. We've looked at the close one. Then there's the closer one. Closer one is nice, but I think the depth of field could be even shallower here. So that I really like that in this one here. We're getting starting to get good blur here, but in the next one, in close to. I think we need more. So I think the focus is okay, but I think we could do with more. Here, let's go try 8. Yeah, we could do with more. Let me try the default here. That's already good. That might be a little bit overkill. So just like I had predicted, 22 is probably too shallow. Let's try 64 here. And that's the ticket. Bob's your uncle, Betty is your aunt. All right, I'm going to go and render these out and in fact include them as Photoshop files as well so that we can see the full renders. And we're going to keep using these exact images in the second part when we're talking a little bit about post-production and what we can do to make these images even better. Oh, do you know what? I was just going to sign off. No, we haven't rendered these out yet, have we? Haha, let's do that. I'm so sorry. Getting ahead of me here. I'm so used to doing this in my own time. No, I want to do this together with you. So there we go. I'm going to go and switch iRay off again. I'm going to render out all 3 of my images now. So under render settings, almost forgot that, crazy stuff. On my render settings, I'm going to go and change the defaults here from 1200 by 1200 to something a little bit larger. So I tend to do it in 3000 by 3000. And I'm thinking under progressive, I think I'm going to try 3000 iterations here. And then under filtering, I've got my denoiser enabled. And there's something else that we could do in this step, and that is tone mapping. And that is technically not part of rendering. It's technically a post-production process. So we'll talk more about that in the second part. There's just a few adjustments that you can make here to adjust the contrast and the colors and also add a bit of vignetting to it. But we'll talk about that in the next part. Just know it exists. I'm not going to be using it. These are the exact settings. I'm using 3000 by 3000, then progressive render, 1000 iterations, render quality disabled. And filtering, I want to go and leave the denoiser on and make the denoiser enabled. I'm going to go and save my scene. Control S, just over saving what I already had there. Command R or Control R to render the scene. And see how iRay thinks about this. And this is what I tend to do. I make this large as my monitor allows. And then I'll just go and keep an eye on this. And this also allows me to literally have a look at my picture in full size while it's rendering, and then also make a mental note of what might need to be done. So when you see this in large, you might see, there's something wrong with the hair, and maybe the hand intersects with it too much. I think it's okay here, so I'm not going to worry about it. But you might see things like, oh yeah, I could have maybe added a different nail color or something, or maybe I could have accessorized her face a little bit, like with earrings. Maybe she's wearing a necklace. That would actually be quite cool here, wearing a necklace on the beach. Not something formal, but something like like a wooden bracelet or whatnot. Having a look at the clothing here, it looks all good. It looks all good. You could tint this, since it's a bit see-through. You could tint this clothing here, but I think we're okay. If at any point you have the feeling we're done here with this, don't be afraid to stop the render. Just hit the cancel button. At that point, iRay will kind of take a break here. It'll give you a little warning here. Would you really like to stop the render? You say, yes, that's cool. And you don't really mind. After 188 iterations, maybe at this resolution, it's actually okay. So there's this school of thought that says, well, you can either render 1000 by 1000 image at 1000 iterations, or you can render a 3000 by 3000 image with 150 iterations and then shrink it down to 1000 by 1000, and then you would have oversampled the image, but that might actually look better. So, one of those things. I think if I let it render, I probably see more detail in the lips coming out here, but like we know, there's a little secret menu here that I can open and just keep rendering now. So I can go and literally, my render settings are already, they're still the same, 1000 iterations. So I can literally go and just resume it and then see, maybe I've changed my mind. So, don't be afraid to experiment, but also don't be afraid to save your render as you're watching it come better. It's just about coming to the end of the render here with 1000 iterations, and I can see that definitely the skin texture has improved, the lips have improved here, some of the skin pores are coming out, so I don't know how well you can see that on the video, but yeah, that's definitely an improvement that the longer rendering time has introduced, even though judging by the after 100 iterations, I could already see, hey, this is almost usable as it was. There's still a lot of stuff that we can do in post-production to this, and if you're in this situation, I kind of recommend that you render this out without the background and treat the background separately in Photoshop and combine this in post-production. But for the sake of time, I'm going to leave it as it is. I'm going to change my little icon here from the render library to my folder, and I'm going to pick the folder on my desktop that I already had here, which is just called New Project. And in here, I'm going to make myself another folder, and I'm going to call that one Renders, just so that I keep it all together. And with that, I'm going to say select folder. Now that's got it selected down here. And now I can go and give it a name. I've already forgotten what I've called my camera, which was Camera Closer. So I'll go and say this is Surfer 3 Closer. And I'm going to go and render the other 2 cameras out as well. Once I save it, this window automatically closes. Just something to be aware of. Once that is saved, there's no way to get that render back. So if you're now thinking, hey, I'd like to save one version with 100 iterations and then continue the render, you can't do that. One of those things. So in order to change the camera that's being rendered out, you just go and switch it here in the viewport. So whatever camera is active. So now I'm going to go maybe to the wide. And once that is selected, I can go and hit the render button again. If you had multiple viewports, it might be difficult to see which camera is being rendered now. One of them has this tiny little yellow border around it. So if I go and select this one now, this is active. This is more visible, I think, if I just quickly go and disable the draw dome here. Now you can see this one is the active camera. If I head over and render this now, then actually my perspective view is being rendered like it is. So make sure you pick the camera that you want rendered if you have multiple cameras. In this case, just click into this viewport and hit render, and then this camera is being rendered the moment I hit render. This also, it being one camera with local dimensions, it will now override these render settings here. So it will not render at 3000 by 3000. This is going to render at whatever we had set here, which was under dimensions, 2000 by 3000. So yeah, kind of what I want. I'm going to go do this, and I'm not going to make you wait. Thank you so much for joining me for this part 1. I hope you found it very informative. In the next part of this course, we're going to find out more about how to pose characters. We're going to delve more into the intricacies of fitting clothing. We're going to look into expressions. We're also going to look into external tools like Photoshop to do a bit of post-production. And we're going to look at other things like Hexagon and ZBrush in order to make fine adjustments on clothing that the smoothing modifier might not have sorted. Thank you so much, and I hope I'll see you in the next part.